Growing up in the 80s and 90s, Mikey heard a lot of myths about the Bermuda Triangle. The truth was way worse. Welcome to Blanket of Shadows. Now buckle your seatbelts because this plane is going down. Mikey had just finished business with some shady characters in sunny Jamaica. If they didn't get caught, they were all going to make an obscene amount of money. They were virtuous pirates, they thought, stealing only from terrible people like the mysterious Esteban de la Cruz who no one had ever actually seen. After some celebratory drinks, he picked up his girlfriend over his shoulder caveman style and carried her, both of them laughing, into their beachside villa. On the surface, everything seemed ideal. He was only in his 30s, but he'd already amassed a plunder of millions, all in offshore accounts. And his girlfriend, she was an international model. He partied on yachts and floated between some of the most beautiful locations in the world, but he didn't know if that's what he wanted. He felt like there had to be something more, and that stealing, even with good intentions, might mean he's a bad person too. The next morning, with his girlfriend still asleep, he snuck outside. Sitting on the beach and looking out at literal paradise, the turquoise and blue water, and the small mountains, all he could think about was how much he hated everyone in his life. His business partners were crooks. His girlfriend was after his money and didn't care about him enough to hide it. He thought the feds were tracking his movements now. And Esteban had learned of his presence and was making threats. It might all come crashing down soon, but he had no way out. He just wanted to go to sleep and wake up in a different life. The sleeping pills he was rattling in the bottle would do more than put him to sleep, especially with the vodka soda he was sipping at 10 a.m. His phone rang. It was his mom. She always called at the worst times. The guy couldn't even kill himself without his mother getting in the way. He declined the call and sent it to voicemail, knowing she would just text. He took another sip of his drink, shook out a few pills, and a chime let him know he was right. He read his mother's text. Aunt Andrea wanted to know how many we should expect for Christmas this year. I told her just me and Irving, it read. But he knew she wasn't done. However, if you want me to add another person, ... And there it was. She always used too many dots. I just love you so much, Michael, she continued. Mikey thought about his parents' worn couch and the bedroom that still had his school-age trophies and car posters, and how his mother had always bought the wrong snacks and then served them on the same dishes he'd eaten from every meal as a kid. He thought about his small hometown and all the people that never left. Only losers spend Christmas in that town, he thought. I'll be there, he typed back. And then he had to toss his phone into the sand because he knew the barrage of messages that was coming. A few days later, Mikey had passed security and was waiting to board a plane to North Carolina. The only luggage he had with him was a roller carry-on full of notebooks and spreadsheets and account numbers that could put him away for decades. It was his source of wealth, but it also felt like a shackle. His tactical roller was supposedly bulletproof and watertight and overbuilt like hell. He was wearing tourist clothes to blend in at the airport, a tropical-themed Hawaiian-style shirt and khakis. It was the only clothing he had with him. He always bought new clothing wherever he went to blend in. An old lady spotted him from across the terminal and glared with shocking intensity. He waved. No response. flicked her off. No response. He looked at a text on his phone and back across the terminal, and she was gone. He was relieved. "Maybe you should have killed yourself," she said, gripping his wrist uncomfortably. Mikey tried to pull his arm back, but she was much stronger than she looked. "Don't get on that plane," she hissed. "You can't fly over those waters." The woman released his wrist and stepped back. Her family was on the spot, apologizing and escorting her away to their flight, but she looked back as she walked and never took her eyes off Mikey. Mikey rubbed his wrists. He considered heeding her warning. He was in a moment of weakness when he'd agreed to the trip, and he disappointed his parents before. They wouldn't be shocked if he didn't show up. "Michael, kid?" a voice asked. Mikey turned around to find an unassuming man with a mustache and jeans and a Chicago Bears t-shirt, and he knew he was a cop before he even said a word. "I'm Rand," he said. "FBI. I'll be sitting next to you. I know you don't want anything to do with me, but Esteban's men are in row 7, so maybe I'm not so bad?" Rand nodded at some men in suits. Mikey turned around to look at them, and they all looked away suspiciously. "I'll get you through this flight, but then in North Carolina we need to talk," Rand said. "Now high-five me and say, 'Go Bears,' and grab a beer." Rand raised a hand. "Go Bears," he said. Mikey shook his head and then high-fived him. "Go Bears," Mikey replied. At the bar, Mikey looked at Rand sipping a soda on one side of the terminal and some of Esteban's men sitting on the other, much more sharply dressed. He finished his beer and left cash for the drink and the tip and wondered if he could run fast enough to catch a cab before either group could catch him. He must have been staring longingly because the bartender leaned in and said, "Don't run. It'll only make things worse." But Agent Bartender was wrong. Mikey had a second row seat in first class, and sure enough, Rand was right next to him. The window seat was empty. Mikey opened the overhead bin to put in his carry-on, but Rand patted the seat next to him. "Let's just keep that here for now," Rand said. Mikey didn't know that he was in a position to make a scene. "So, do you believe in the Bermuda Triangle?" Rand asked, setting the carry-on down gently. Mikey chuckled nervously, never taking his eyes off the suitcase. "Is it even real?" he asked. "I mean, I heard a lot about it as a kid, but I've flown through it so many times." "I can neither confirm nor deny," Rand replied. Mikey looked back at the passengers behind him, trying not to look at anyone particular. But the burly men in row 7 immediately looked down at their phones, acting like they weren't focused on him. "This is Captain Wilson from the flight deck," a voice calmly announced on the intercom. "We've got clear skies ahead, not a cloud in sight. Should be a smooth flight. So sit back and relax, and we'll be in the air in no time." And the flight was smooth sailing until about the time Mikey asked an attendant for another champagne. All the amazing wine he'd had in his short life, and his last drink as a free man was a split of grocery store bubbles. A sharp bump jolted the plane. The skies grew dark. Mikey looked at the radar on his phone, and it showed clear skies. Something was wrong. The stewardess handed him his split and told him to buckle up before Captain Wilson, sounding confused, instructed everyone to have a seat until they could figure out what was happening. The second jolt knocked the split from Mikey's hands. He unbuckled and left his seat to grab the little bottle. As he lunged to grab it, lightning illuminated the plane, and then the lights went off. The front of the plane tilted down, and the split rolled back to Mikey. But then the plane tilted more, and Mikey was rolling down the aisle too, until he slammed into the pilot's door beside the flight attendants. The next few minutes were a blur. There were people praying and crying. There was a sickening feeling of falling. And the next thing Mikey knew, Rand was slipping a life jacket onto him and pushing him down the slide into the water. The water was shockingly cold and woke Mikey up. Mikey was dismayed to see that Rand had brought the suitcase with him. There were several rescue crafts being inflated. The plane was floating on the water for the moment, and there were scared and crying people all around. The clouds were dark and the storm was strong. Every now and then lightning illuminated the skies, but otherwise the flares in the water were the only source of light in the rainy and desolate ocean. Mikey looked up, trying to clear his head, and he saw what looked like a light up on the hill of a small island nearby. He started trying to swim, but he was still foggy-headed, and the life jacket was awkward. Several of the guys from row 7 swam over to Mikey and Rand, slowly, gliding like gators. The waves were bobbing him a bit, but Mikey could swear he could feel the water moving sideways. He looked back at the plane and noticed that the water was slowly swirling. Either he was imagining it, or everyone else was just distracted by other things. "Not the time, fellas," Rand said, holding on to Mikey's suitcase. "He's FBI," Mikey said. The burly men looked at each other. No, we are," one of them said. "In other circumstances, I'd show you my badge, but..." Rand stopped the conversation with a gunshot, which sent the scene into overheated fury. The murmurs and prayers turned to screams and chaos. Mikey took the opportunity to slip out of the life jacket. He grabbed his suitcase and started swimming to the light. He had been a swimmer in high school, so the strokes came back to him naturally, but with a suitcase it was awkward. He didn't understand anything else that was going on, and just focused on getting away from the swirling water. As he swam, the light on the island kept moving to the left, and he kept having to correct his path. He was now sure that the water was swirling, and it inspired him to swim even faster. The darkness had given him a cover for a good head start, but if they were willing to fire at each other at a crash scene over him, they would soon be after him too. Behind him, the screams grew louder. He looked back and the plane was noticeably rotating. There was an eddy forming. "He's getting away!" one of the men yelled. Mikey swam as fast as he could, urging himself on like he was coming from behind at a swim meet. He wasn't the only strong swimmer, as one of the men was pacing him in the dark. He could see the island a bit more clearly now, and he felt like he could get there if he wasn't caught. "Stop!" the man behind him yelled. "FBI!" Mikey didn't answer, just swam. He had no clue who was behind him. He just knew he was going to keep going. "No!" the man behind him yelled, further back than he sounded before. "Help! Help!" And then he went below the surface of the water, never to be heard from again. Mikey could feel that he was further from the burgeoning eddy, as its pull was less and less, but he assumed that the man went down with a strong current. Looking back, Mikey could see in the lightning strikes that the water was swallowing the plane and anyone else close by. He wanted to stop swimming and take a break because his head was getting light, but he kept on towards the island. Around him in the lightning strikes, he noticed several fins. What if it was sharks that had taken his stalker? No time to think about that, just kick and dig. One of the sharks bumped into him, which caused a panic for them both. Another shark took a run at him, but this one put some teeth on his arm to see what he was made of. His blood was in the water. It was just a scrape, albeit a painful one, but that was enough to get their attention. A shark grabbed onto his injured arm, but he was able to punch it in the nose and wriggle away. It hurt like hell, so he grabbed the suitcase with the other arm and kept swimming. He felt like the sharks were circling him, like the eddies swirled around the plane, and he would go down just the same. He was losing blood from his right arm, and his left arm was dragging a carry-on. He was at a massive disadvantage to predators perfected over millions of years. The sharks all went in at once, and Mikey was a dead man swimming. But then, all of a sudden, the sharks stopped and turned away. And soon the rain did as well. He figured he had to be close to more shallow water. But his body was giving out. No, he thought. He had survived too much just to stop here at the shore. But his head was pounding, and he was getting weak, and only one arm really worked. In the better light, he could see how bad the wound was on his arm and how much blood he was losing. He couldn't believe the sharks just let him go. He should have realized that they were scared of something much, much worse. He kept above water as long as he could, but he wasn't invincible. Slowly, he sunk below the water, even as he swam on, trying to get back up to the surface, but lacking the strength. He held his breath as long as he could. The water was clear and beautiful, and he could see the remains of planes and ships all around him in the moonlight, all different eras. As the water filled his lungs, he wondered if this is what it felt like to be part of a museum. He thought about his parents in their goofy Christmas sweaters, and then everything went dark. At some point, he felt warmth on his face. He slowly became aware of his body, but it felt like a stone. He was safe and wrapped in blankets and near a fire. "Don't try to move yet," a woman's voice said in a faint Irish accent. "The medicine needs more time to work." Mikey was always a terrible patient and tried to stir. He stood and lost his balance and crashed into the wall, breaking some old wood. The woman mumbled something in a language he'd never heard before, and her words echoed and softened in his head until he fell back into the safety of sleep. Anne, the 20-something woman with a tattered robe who was tending to Mikey, dragged him back to the straw mattress on the floor of the beach cottage. She was surprised that someone else washed ashore, and even more surprised that he had survived. According to the name on the tag of his strange box with wheels, his name was Michael Kidd. She rubbed some more herb salve on his worst shark bite. With her skill and knowledge, the wound was healing quickly, right before her eyes. "Now what will we do with you?" she asked out loud. Anne walked over to the broken wall of her hut. The wood was aging, but so far it had held its own against the elements until this guy showed up. She pulled out the broken board to assess the damage and discovered a piece of paper hidden inside. As she unfolded it, she instantly recognized the handwriting, tracing her fingers over the letters. She couldn't believe it. There was a hidden message inside her house this entire time. It read, "Anne, when M appears, he will kill the gods. Blade first, blood of the innocent last. I miss you so much." "I miss you too," she said as tears welled up in her eyes. She was suddenly filled with hope. She had been stuck here a long, long time. Heal up, she told the stranger, running her fingers through his fine black hair. You've got a rough time ahead. The next morning, Mikey woke up with what felt like the worst hangover ever. His whole body ached, his head burned, and he had no idea where he was. He sat up and grabbed his arm, which had already scabbed over. He looked around and he was in a small cottage. One room with a cooking area and a bed of straw on the floor. All kinds of odd containers and jars and cooking contraptions. Through the window, he saw the beautiful sea, but it looked like they were surrounded by storms. Anne came back into the cottage with a bucket of water and some plants. How are we feeling? She asked. I don't know. Where am I? Mikey asked. I wish I had an easy answer, she replied. Oh, and you're welcome for saving your life. Anne handed Mikey a cup of tea. It was sweet and unlike anything he'd ever tasted, but it calmed his nerves and eased his pain. A long time ago, she began, a middling lord from Europe sailed west to the Americas to find a place where he could start a new kingdom so he could be king, with no real skill except ambition. When they got west of Bermuda, the seas changed. A rogue wave, on an otherwise calm day, picked up the ships and wrecked them just outside the island. They walked through the shallow waters, where the Lord put his sword into the sand and named himself king before even a head count to see if they had lost any souls. King Calix the First, and thank God, the last. Now, the island has low marshlands and jungles by the beach, which is where we are, and then it slopes up to a giant cliff on the other side. The soldiers said that the top of the hill would be sufficient to build a small castle or at least a fort, and that there were freshwater springs. But the wizard and enchantress told the king that the island could not be tamed. So the king went into the island himself, alone. I have spoken to the island, he proclaimed when he returned after a few hours. It has accepted the name of Insula Ignota. It will bless my reign if we honor the three spirits that live here. In our tongue, they are the God of justice, the God of knowledge, and the Goddess of plenty. If we live by these principles, we can live in harmony with the island. The enchantress and wizard doubted the king's story and feared the king's definition of harmony as he only thought of himself. There was always balance in the universe, and getting more of one thing meant less of another. So there is always a cost, and people who don't consider the costs are the most dangerous kind of people. But the wizard and the enchantress knew that they were the only ones keeping the people safe, and they could do more alive than dead, so they held their tongues. And so, the three gods of Insula Ignota were created in the image of a man, a very flawed man. Mikey was rapt by the story, but confused. So what do these gods have to do with me? He asked. If you want to leave, Anne said, you have to kill them. Mikey walked out onto the beach and looked out at the same ocean he had viewed from the beach at the hotel. He had traded a known danger for an unknown one. He looked up at the stone fort on top of the hill and wondered what fresh hell awaited him here.